to another episode of Boosted Rolls, our Machine and Hearts podcast focused on EU meta, tournaments and tactics. My name is Tomasz and I play Circle.
Hi guys, I'm Simon and I stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/HonestSci every Monday to Thursday from 8 till 11 Central European time. So do feel free to come and join. And today we have with us another special guest who I first met at Steamstorm. It was one of my first big tournaments, and then again in the finals of the EU Masters where he gave me a sound thrashing, but a very good game. And so please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Marcin Mycek. So I've been playing War Machine for the last 8 years. Whole Mark 2, I was playing Cador. After the Mark 3 hit, I switched to the Mercenaries, and that have been my main faction throughout this edition, with a brief changes to first Convergence of Cyrus and recently Protectorate. After the Oblivion came into place, I switched back to Mercenaries, and I've been playing it at the WTC and recently at Polish Masters.
And when you were playing Convergence, sorry to immediately jump off tangent, but what were you dabbling in with the Convergence stuff?
So when I was playing Convergence, the model that I thought at that time was underutilized was the battle engine. So both of my lists were built around double battle engine. Back in the time, the primary list was Axis, and in theory, I had the other list, but both the WTC, I played like almost purely Axis with double engines and some heavy warjacks.
Oh, makes sense.
And did you have any success with Convergence?
With the Convergence, I won the Polish Masters once, and we placed within top 5 of WTC. We went 5-1 that year. It was 2 years ago in Belgium.
So you saying that with Convergence you won Polish Masters once takes us straight into why you're here, because you won Polish Masters.
Again. How many times have you won it? Is it twice or is it more?
Actually, it's 3 times.
3 times. So we had once with Convergence, once with Mercs, and...
Actually, the first year I was playing, I won it with Cador.
Okay, so Cador, Mercs, and Cock. Fine, cool. So you've won it 3 times with 3 different factions. All right. So tell us about the Polish Masters. Which city is it? Who's it organised by? Like, is it? What's the format? Is it organised as a kind of WTC trial thing, or is it totally its own tournament? Or what's how many people? Tell us everything about it. What's the Polish Masters like?
Sure. So when I started playing, there was a tradition that Polish Masters moved from city to city, depending on where was the previous winner from. Over the last year, one city, namely Katowice, and in general the region of Silesia, took over the organization, and they are organizing it for the 3rd or 4th time, I think. So it's a typical Masters, whatever the current steamroller is. So it was Masters Diet, typical with 2 lists. This year, unfortunately, a lot of people resigned just before the event, so there were only 30 people. Typically, this is the event throughout the year that gathers most of the people. It's usually one of the biggest tournament, and that's between somewhere 40, 50 people.
And what do you think happened this year that caused the sudden dip? Do you think it was like a WTC sort of burnout, or what was the cause, do you think?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
I would say it's probably because usually the Polish Masters was before the WTC in summertime, and this year it was right after WTC, and also it was rescheduled a few times, so it caused some issues for people.
Oh, that's a bit of a shame, but I think 30 is still a strong field, and I'm assuming that from those 30 players you had some of the best players in Poland. For example, Tomasz, I'm assuming you were there.
I was there, yeah.
Excellent. Otherwise, this would have been a strange podcast. You not attending the Polish Masters, my mind would have blown. I'd have just turned off the microphone and walked away. Right. Okay. So, and let's talk a little bit then about the meta. So what factions were we seeing lots of? Was it people testing new things out and having fun? Was it people bringing the strong lists that we saw at the WTC and they wanted to sort of pick those up? Or was it people bringing their old stuff? Or what were we seeing?
So we've seen that throughout this 30 people, it kind of reflected a typical meta that we observe on Polish tournaments. So we had a representative from nearly every faction, including Infernals. The two most popular factions were Circle Orboros and Krix, both sporting 5 players. So almost every third player were either Circle or Krix. The other notable mentions were Retribution and Krimkin, both sporting 3 players. Apart from that, all the rest is 1-2 players.
Okay.
Including Mercenaries, there were 2 players. In terms of the lists, a lot of players from WTC picked virtually the same list they played. That was true for Tomasz. That was almost true for myself. I did change one model in my list. I tested some new lists, but actually after winning in a test game, Tomasz handed my ass to myself. Like, I decided, okay, I'm not ready with the new list. I'm going to stick with the old ones. However, some of the players were testing really, really new things. Tomasz Tutaj switched from Protectorate to Circle Orboros, playing his old love of Grail. Artur Ritz switched also from Circle Orboros to Retribution of Syra, and Paweł Kruk did play Crucible Guard, the same faction he was playing at the WTC, but he totally changed his list and he picked up Baldwin.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, that's nice to see. And it's nice to hear like a good spread, I would say. Some people playing the old stuff, some people playing the new. You pussied out some of the WTC lists. And apparently so did Tomasz, and that's exactly what I would have done as well. So, yeah, I understand. So you said you changed one model. That has me intrigued. So for those that don't know your WTC lists, what were your lists and what was the one model that you changed?
Sure. So I'm sporting Montador1, Captain Bartolo Montador in Talion Charter, and Magnus2 in Irregulars. In my Talion list, I have 2 Blockaders, 2 Talons, First Mate Hawk, a full set of Powder Monkeys, 2 Swamp Gobber River Riders, 2 units of Press Gangers, which usually play in ambush, Sharded Dirge Steers, and Commodore Cannon and the crew. In my other list, apart from Magnus himself, I have also a Blockader, this time just one thing. A Talon, 2 Tauros, Alexia, her second incarnation on the horse, Anastasia, Harlow Hold'em High, Hermit of Henchhold, Widget, small unit of Idran Skirmishers with the Chieftain and Guide, 2 units of Kayazi Eliminators, and Orin Midwinter. And actually, the Orin is the new addition. Usually, I was playing Iris 1 in that slot. And to be honest, this was the first tournament ever when I was playing Mercs. And I was not playing Iris 1, and I replaced her with Orin Midwinter.
I was wondering where the Orin came from, because I was trying to work out, like, what's he dropped? It sounds like he's got everything, and I just totally missed the fact that Iris wasn't there because I just assumed he was automatically there. Interesting. Cool.
And what made you change Iris to Orin?
So when I was playing this list, Montador has like the most stable matchup. So Magnus2 is like king of unknown. Like you go to the middle of the board, you apply a pressure, and then you try to think what to do. On the other hand, the Montador is the king of like organized play. So most of the time I was playing, when I thought that the double Blockader list would struggle, I would drop Magnus2 and try to think of a way to get out of this mess. Over the time, I learned like what are actually weak matchups of Montador, and it turned out that most of this time this is the Retribution of Syra, especially Garrett 2 list. The second problematic list was virtually all Orboros list, and I would be playing Magnus2 against virtually whole circle. When playing against Scorn, people seeing my pair would typically drop Rashet, and then it would be also problematic for Magnus. And most of this matchup come to few specific spells that need to go through, and depending on whether they go through or not, they are positive or negative for Magnus. So if I can stop for 2 turns Strangleholds, play against Wormwood, that's a good matchup for Magnus. If I don't, that's a poor matchup for Magnus. Similarly, if I can stop Bloodmark from Rashet, or if I can stop Hunter's Mark If I can stop mortality from Garrett, then I can the matchup gets easier. Most of the time, I have to rely on mistakes from my opponent in order for them to kill some Adrian skirmishers, fill Alexia with the souls, and then I have access to the soul vortex. But like relying on your opponent to make a very critical mistake around very critical play, that's not really a good plan to win the tournament. So I decided to put Orin, especially that in all of those matchups, Iris 1 was usually not pulling her weight, and she was not doing like virtually anything apart from being pricey sniper model.
Iris can't see through stealth, so she's probably not sniping Fury from Wormwood. Rashef is usually way, way back, and if he's in danger, he can just Breath of Corruption her. And Gareth has access to stealth as well, and he's very high defense, and he can be behind the wall, so it's probably too high of a defense for Iris. So that sounds like a wise move.
Yeah, it sounds like a really solid tech piece when you look at those things that you're targeting. Speaking as the guy that was playing Wormwood recently, I'd absolutely hate to see Orin, and I never want to see Orin in a list. You're just like, oh, fuck. Definitely ticks those boxes. All right, fair enough. So you were basically dropping your double blockader list into a lot of stuff. And for some people who maybe haven't spoken to you about this before, they might be a bit surprised to hear about that with the current scenario packet. So when thinking about especially stuff like Anarchy and King of the Hill, that a double blockader package is effective. So maybe can you talk to us about the scenario pieces that you have in that list that help make this a thing?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, what people very often miss at the start when analyzing the Montador list is that the fit, it's kind of marked to fit. It works that if you end an advance, and it doesn't matter what is the source of advance, it can be normal advance during the activation, it can be counter charge, sidestep, overtake, whatever the advance is. If it ends inside the control area of Montador, you get knocked down. So in a way, if you are not immune to knockdown, if you are not steady and you would like to charge the blockaders and you would end up in the control of Montador, you really cannot, because you get knocked down before you do anything. So, surprisingly, one of these factions is Grimkin. Virtually, there is nothing steady there, and all those beasts that want to charge your Colossals, they all fall down. A bit like 50-50 faction is Legion. Very often they all get knocked down, but you can play against Fianna 2 lists with all flying war beasts, and now, surprisingly, they are steady. So it sometimes depends on the purse. Sometimes it's just good against the whole faction. A lot of people are playing greedy because there is not a lot of knockdown effects. And for example, even people have access to a solo that grants steady in the Slaughter Fleet. They usually don't play it. So with most of the Kriegspurs, there is virtually no model that is steady and is immune to knockdown. So that allows the Warcaster to go really up the table, and most of the game he charges turn 1, he fits and charges turn 2. And at this moment he's 1 inch up the middle line. And he has 12-inch control where people don't really want to end their movement. So either they keep their models where they were, which is usually not a good place, or they actually move backwards. So the way it works is that you either move in, you get knocked down, or you move outside of the scenario. And most of the situation, if the opponent is not immune to knockdown, he actually gets pushed out of the scenario, even though you have 2 Colossals, which can struggle. Very often Bartolo has the upper hand on the scenario. However, the list has a lot of solos. Those solos can both score quickly. So, for example, Bunkers is a very good scenario for him. However, he also has access to 2 units of press gangers. And apart from being a good ambush unit that's good at killing stuff, very often one of the unit is pure contesting unit. So you deploy a unit far away from any harm, just within 12 inches of contesting somewhere, and you for 6 turns, very tediously, you run one model, they die, you run one model, they die, you run one model, they die. And most of the time, you actually have more contesting models than the opponent.
Right. Because of these solos that threaten scoring and threaten flags, and the press gangers that threaten your edges, your edge zones, and also contest like a motherfucker if you need them to.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's your Battle of One, and so you think, therefore, that this packet, even though it is quite live, doesn't necessarily screw you quite so much, mainly because of this Mark II feat that will just hold people back, but also because you've got those press gangers and solos that keep you in the game.
Yeah, that's true. So most of the time, the battle group takes the center space for themselves, and with 12-inch threat on melee on blockader and 15 inches threat on shooting, people usually respect this distance. So it means that you take the middle of the table as your space. On the other hand, if there is some terrain that blocks your movement, you can counter this with the deployment of press gangers.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds cool. All right. Before we move on to the battle report segment, going into the tournament then, you were thinking that obviously you wanted to drop your double blockader list where you could, and you had your Magnus list ready to target certain things. Were there some players or lists that you simply didn't want to see? Were there some that you were just hoping to hit the big red dodge button and not see them for any reason at all?
That's a good question. So Montador plays very well into Grimkin, with some exceptions. So in general, if there is my algorithm for rating Grimkins is, if there is no Dreamer, that's a very good matchup. If there is Dreamer, it's okay. But if there is Dreamer and she has not 1 Cage Rager, but 2, that's a bad matchup. So that was one I wanted to avoid. And Magnus2 is kind of not really good into Grimkins, not that good into Grimkins, and it's hard matchup to play. The second matchup that I really, really wanted to not play is the whole Crucible Guard, which is not relying on spells, but still is very shooty and can just can both remove even Arm 22 Colossals under Montador, or can easily remove all the pieces that Magnus2 has.
And since Montador isn't maybe the most played or known caster, especially for those who started a bit later on, can we just have a quick run through his spell list so people know what you've got available to you?
Yeah, sure. So Montador is built mainly around 2 spells. One is Batten Down the Hatches, that for all models in the battle group gives +3 armor and also -2 defense. It also makes all models in his battle group steady. That's one spell. It's not an upkeep. It costs 3 and you have to cast it every turn. The second very important spell is Hotshot, which is an upkeep on a model in a battle group, and it makes all ranged damage rolls automatically boosted. So you can upkeep it on 1 blockader, have all 2d3 sprays boosted on damage, including all ancillary attacks and other additional shots, then swap it to the other blockader and have all the damage shots boosted. In addition to that, he has Broadside, which makes all model in the battle group immediately make 1 range attack. Apart from that, because his Mercenary was caster with no access to Arc Node, he has some ridiculous 2 nukes, which he never uses. And apart from that, as his feat, every model that advances and ends in his control, they are knocked down, and his 6 focus.
Okay. So I think the main thing, as you said, was the hot swapping hot shot and batten down the hatches. So you've got 2 super tanky blockaders who happen to have all boosted damage rolls plus ancillary attacks. You mentioned that you've got 1 ancillary attack from his spell list. Do you have another one from another model in the list?
Yeah, so Powder Monkeys, and there are 3 in the list, can either add additional focus, or they have also ancillary attack for Privatory Warjacks, which blockaders are.
Okay. So you've got one hell of a lot of sprays if you want them, all fully boosted if you do it right.
Yeah, so on average, that's 4 sprays per turn from blockaders from the main activation. one additional one from the powder monkey. So typically you are speaking about 10 sprays per turn. If you really wanted to push 11, then you can cast the broadside from the caster, but then you either don't swap the upkeep or you don't cast the button down the hatches. So typically this is either the going all in, or it's a fit turn when you feel safe and you think that you don't need to cast button down the hatches.
Right, when no one's going to do any damage to you anyway, so why bother? Why not just have the extra spray? Right, okay. And what power are those sprays generally?
It's power 14, fire, and continuous fire.
Okay, so pretty damn tasty. Fine. Tomasz, anything to ask or add before we move into the battle report section?
No, I think we're good. We can move to battle reports.
All right, well, I'll let you introduce the scenarios and stuff.
All right, so going into round 1, it's Anarchy is the first round. Who did you got, what did you drop, and how was your game?
So my plan for the tournament was to avoid Crucible Guard, avoid Garrett 2, and avoid Tomek. Avoiding Tomek worked, the other 2 points didn't. So the first round I got my worst potential match in form of Paweł Kruk playing Crucible Guard, and he had Baldwin and Silvestro in his pair, and he chose Baldwin to pit against my lists.
Baldwin, interesting. And were you more afraid of Baldwin or Silvestro?
So in either way, I cannot really play Bartolo Montador, because in Baldwin list there is a Colossal and there is Infantry, and Colossal has this 1 less die against fire. On the other hand, the Infantry, the Crucible Guard Infantry, is immune to fire. And it's quite similar with the Silvestro. I don't remember exactly the models in the list, but a lot of those were immune or halfly immune to fire. Both of those lists have virtually higher range than Montador. They should, so they kind of don't care about the fit. So I was forced to play Magnus2. So the main question was, what would Paweł choose? And he chose Baldwin.
All right. I think the Silvestro is actually much better on scenario than Baldwin. And if you are dropping Magnus2, you're going for scenario. So tell me, how's Anarchy for Magnus2 as a scenario?
So most of the time, Magnus2 plan is to try and force the scenario win. He usually, so with the irregulars, the Team Force benefit is at +1. Reroll, and you have Anastasia, which grants you +1. The way the math work is that 5 out of 6 times you win the roll statistically. So you have large control over who starts and who goes seconds. With Magnus2, you usually go first. You run far because he has escort, so all the warjacks run 2 inches more, and then they fret 2 inches more. So that pushes the opponent a lot. And then when you get the space, and you can try to think how to plan out the rest of the game. So most of the time you apply the pressure, and depending how the opponent react, if he goes more aggressively into scenario, you try to alpha strike, follow up with the fit, and try to build on top of attrition. Or if the opponent a bit backs away, then you try to go for the scenario. Most of the time, they back away a bit, and you go for the scenario.
All right, and can you catch all the models in your control range? Because it's only 12, and Anarchy is quite spread scenario. So how do you deal with those zones that are really far away?
Yeah, so most of the time, if the opponent backs away, then typically you try to fit either on models that are hard to remove from scenario. So you block them from entering the scenario. So you don't really totally block entering the scenario, you just block the models that are problematic to remove. So that would be Colossals, that would be Warjacks. Sometimes you're able to fit deeply into opponent's army, and then you try to pick one side and block that. So you catch some portion of his army, but it's that portion that can, for example, you pick his center left side and try to block him moving to the left side.
All right, so you can take this side and play the game further horizontally.
Yeah.
All right, so tell me something about the game. Who won the roll and how did it go?
So I did win the roll. I decided to go first. On the right side of Pavel, there were the shooting infantry. In the center were virtually all the other models apart from the Colossal, which was on the left. On my side, I had all the warjacks in the center, a bit moved to the left. And on my right, I had the infantry, namely the Idran skirmishers and Alexia. So after the first turn, Pavel didn't really enter the scenario. He prepared for like attrition war with him taking the first shots. So at this moment, when I analyze the table, I've seen that probably in order to destroy my Colossal, he would be using his Colossal and his infantry. He also has this spray jack that applies oil, and that was virtually the only model I could kill that turn. So my plan was to go into attrition game to force Pavel into exchange of blows, but in order to effectively use Colossal, he would have to move him towards center of the table, so outside of the zones, and also the infantry would stand and aim, which would mean that he wouldn't put a lot of models into the zone, and also the infantry would stay far away from the zones. So my plan was to kind of sacrifice the Colossal and some more models for him to not strongly enter the scenario. And that's more or less how it worked out. So I managed to kill his spray light warjack with my Colossal, put there one additional Toro that was supposed to countercharge something, maybe. That was actually an error. With the rest of the army, like kind of skirting around. And Pavel did exactly what we said. So he just pushed the trigger and annihilated anything that was within his reach. He activated Hermit, slumped him with the caster, activated the caster, which has this prey-like fit. So as long as he follows the order, anything inside his control area has effectively -2 defense, -2 arm. And even before he activated the infantry, he already killed the Colossal, then proceeded to kill Toro and some few other models. But he didn't enter the zones really strong. So the next turn, I was able to score 3 points. And from this advantage, I managed to pull at the end of the game like just enough 5 points to win. Although at the end of the game, I virtually had like no models on the table.
Yeah, it sounds like a typical Baldwin problem, kind of like Sloan has, that you have such a long range and such a strong shooting power that you just stand back, shoot. And even though you killed your opponent army, you never really entered the scenario. So when you enter the scenario, it's probably trying not to lose, not trying to win in scenario. And that might be a bit too late. So you find the best way to get out of this game, to win on scenario. You took it and you got it. So good job, Marcin. Tell me what was the best and what was the worst play on your and your opponent's side.
So from my side, I think that I overcommitted to this play. So I could have given Pavel less models. I gave away additional Toro apart from the Colossal. And this is something I could have changed. Like he was too far and he was inside the control and he was like in range of all the shooting. So I would say that was the biggest mistake from my side. The second small mistake, but I remember it clearly, is that I advanced quite far with the Chaos Eliminators first turn within the range, within like maximum deviation range of the weapon crews. He had 2 of those. And both of those weapon crews shot in the direction of Chaos Eliminators, both deviated in the correct direction, and both actually killed a single Eliminator. So I think that I could easily move 2 inches less with those units and still and get like almost a unit free, which shouldn't have been killed. Yeah. From Pavel's side, I think that looking at this fifth turn, he didn't really need the Colossal to kill. So he moved within the range in order to both spray and shoot my Colossal, which forced him to move the Colossal toward the center of the table. If he would just stick with the main cannon, just applying the rust, he could move the Colossal in the direction of the circular zone, potentially contesting it for the next turn. Instead, he decided to go for the sprays, which was kind of an overkill. At the moment when he was activating the infantry, like the Colossal was already dead. So probably at this stage, it was too much. So the Colossal could contest. And the second thing is, I think that he went for a dual shot, which forces him to aim with the Crucible Guard infantry. I think that he could move and then reposition into the zone, or at least to be closer to contesting with a higher number of models for the next turn.
Oh yeah, so you maybe wouldn't be able to remove all of them.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move to the second round. It's bunkers. Who did you got and how did it go?
So I played against Andrzej Szymański, Elros, who was playing Retribution. I tried to dodge it, but I got the first Scary Garrett 2 with 2 Tridents, with AFG and some shooting Warjacks.
What was his off list?
I think it was Alara 2 with this nice tech of Jack Marshalled Warjacks that, I think it's a Siren that goes up to power like Bazillion and just wrecks Colossals in one activation.
Oh, and you weren't worried about this? I mean, was there any chance that he's going to drop Alara 2 instead of Garrett 2?
So I think that whatever his list would choose, I cannot really drop Bartolo into those. So I knew I was going to play Magnus, and I decided that if he picks Alara, then I'll try to think of a plan back then. But he didn't drop, so I did this mental exercise, to be honest.
All right, fair enough. And tell me about the terrain on the table, because he was playing 3 huge bases, so terrain had to impact the game somehow.
Actually, in this game, there was not enough terrain to actually influence the game. There were 2 forests in the middle of the table. So we are playing bunkers with the 3 middle flags. Somewhere between my right flag was inside the forest, with the forest spreading more toward the center of the table, and it was similar situation for the left flag. However, in the middle of the table, there was virtually no relevant terrain, some waters, some rough terrain. There was one terrain that was granting concealment, but like all of those terrains didn't really matter in this match.
Okay. So who won the roll and how did the game go?
So with +1 and roll, I once again won it. I decided to go first. Adam was choosing the site. He deployed his wall in the middle of the table, I think inside his zone.
Oh, he deployed the wall. Do you think that was a mistake?
So in general, the game was quite fast, and maybe I'll cut to it because it actually influences all the other decisions. So Adam didn't have the chance to play against blockaders. That's one thing. He didn't have chance to play really all the new models from Mercs, and you could clearly see that there was some time before since he last time played, and he made one critical mistake of very carefully measuring the distance from my Tauros, but he didn't have engraved in his mind what is the threat range of the blockader. And people kind of assume that heavies usually have higher threat range compared to any other models, and actually in this list the blockader has the highest range. So he put one of the tridents inside charge range of the blockader, so before anything happened he lost one of the tridents, and I was able to jump him enough that virtually in almost one turn it was over on scenario, because he never left his rectangular zone.
All right, so you went in for a trident, you removed it, and then you used models that you had to your disposal to push his army as far away from the flags as possible to get the scenario in the following turn. Is that somehow accurate?
Yeah, so I tried to kill as many easy to kill models. So Idrian's killed one sniper. The Harlow Hold'em High killed almost all Electromancers and the other sniper. He has 4 shots and Swift Hunter, so if he gets one model in range, he can kind of Pac-Man to kill the others, and that's what he did with Ghost Shot. That's quite easy, even though I think he died the next turn. On the other flank, the Anastasia killed a second sniper. Blockader killed one Trident, and that leaves a heavy. No, not heavy. Yes, a heavy Warjack, one shooting Jack, Moros, and the other 2 battle engines. One was tied up in the combat. And the second, also, the landing spots were blocked by Kayazi Eliminators, which are quite hard to remove once you kill the Electromancers. So I didn't put that much model in order to jump the retribution, but that was mainly because I already killed one Trident and I managed to remove the Electromancers and he only had 1 unit.
All right, fair enough. So even though you didn't remove everything, like you removed all the models that he would use for contesting. So if he wanted to contest, he would need to use some big pieces from his army.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the third round. It's King of the Hill. Tell me something about your opponent and about the terrain on the table.
So I was playing once against Pavel, this time Pavel Mierzyński, who goes by the nickname of Sir Pablito. He's playing Krix, and as his pair, he has Rahera in the Slaughter Fleet, and Asphyxius 3 with a lot of Slayers and 1 Cipher and some minor supporting stuff. I decided that since neither of his army had really any anti-knockdown tech, I decided to safely drop Bartolo. In retrospect, he agreed with analyses that potentially Rahera would be a bit better caster into this matchup, but since he didn't have the Rahera up played to the level like he felt comfortable with, and it was quite new matchup for him, he decided to drop Asphyxius 3 with a lot of Slayers in Black Industries.
And can I just quickly ask about the terrain and the size of the terrain? So in the Polish meta, what percentage of the WTC terrain, like what percentage size are we talking about? Is it something like the British Nationals where somebody did see some terrain once 1 year, but we haven't seen any since? Or was it like the WTC where you can barely see any table?
So it really depends on the table. I think that out of those 5 games I played, 3 games, at least 2 games, were really on a table where there were a lot of houses, a lot of line of sight blocking terrains, like clouds that were created from multiple 3 inches, 5 inches clouds, so quite large clouds. Mm-hmm. Some of the tables there were some line of sight blocking terrains, but they were not that large and not that many. So it really depended a bit on the table.
Okay, and how was this one?
So with this table, there were actually 3 large line of sight blocking terrains that affected the deployment. So there was on my jumping to the battle, there was one house that was in the middle of the table, a bit to my right side, and there were additionally 2 large forests to the left side, one on my side of the table and the other one on the opponent side.
Okay.
I think there were some more, but they were far enough from the center, and all of the action happened in the center of the table.
All right, cool. Sorry for the interruption. Crack on.
All right, so who won the role to go first?
I'm not sure who won the role. I think it was me. That's kind of a pattern here. But I definitely remember that I went first and he chose the side, and he sent me to the side of the table with this building that really affected how to divide or not the army and how to spread your forces.
All right. So if Slayers went second, I guess you won the roll. How did you dealt with this building?
So I knew that I have large advantage due to my feat, that if I can acquire enough space in the middle, I can start the attrition war in my favor. In case of if he would move toward, like, so he either would walk inside my feet or he would walk around. If he walks around, I can switch the side and try to block the other side with the ambushing press gangers. So that was my plan for scenario. Because of that, I decided to move all my battle group toward left flank. Potentially, if he decided to go to my right flank, like behind this wall, I was happy to sacrifice a Talon there. So he was there as a form of backup. And if not, I was planning to center one unit of press gangers. The game turns out that the whole battle group of Bartolo more or less ran forward with two of the colossals in the middle, Talons flanking those two colossals, a cannon a bit to the right, and the caster exactly in the middle of the table. He decided to play quite aggressively with two warjacks running quite far. So actually within a charge range of the blockaders, and some jacks backing them up behind. He wanted to rely on defense 13 and armor 21 against shooting, or 19 in the combat. However, the Bartolo list has some tricks, especially against warjacks. So one of the warjacks got slammed from the cannon. The other jack was hit by Talon, and Talon on his reach weapon has stall, which makes warjacks stationary. So I managed to make two of his jacks low defense, and that was enough for charging blockader to wreck both of those heavies. Third heavy was wrecked by the other blockader, which favorably managed to, I think, knock movement, or he slammed it at the start. I'm not sure about the details, but he managed to quickly disable his high defense. So the first turn, the first turn of engagement went quite well, with three jacks almost dead. One jack was alive but without the cortex, and it was stationary. With my caster sitting in the middle of the table fitting. So he didn't really have the chance to retaliate back then. My feat was covering my middle, the middle circular zone and edge of the left zone. So the plan was that the Talon was just clipping the zone. All his jacks have exactly one each reach. So if this jack was within 11 inches of my warcaster, then whatever comes trying to kill this Talon would be inside the fit. The other zone was unguarded, and he took this occasion. He destroyed my objective. He scored there for 1 point. However, the next turn I was able to regain control on that side to score in the middle zone 2 points, one on the flag and one on the zone. Sacrificing the left zone, just contesting it. And at this point, we were 3-2 on scenario. He managed to score 1 in his turn, so it went to 3-3. At this moment of the game, I had the advantage of attrition, and it started really to affect the game. So I was in control of the middle zone. I was heavily contesting the right zone, and every turn I scored 2 points in the middle. He scored 1 on his left, and with the initial push of the points within 2-3 turns, I would win on the scenario, and that's how it ended.
Yeah, and I guess his list doesn't have a great ways to remove press gangers from the edges of the zones, so he would need to send a Slayer, I guess, and that would remove a Slayer from the fight.
Yeah, so he had some mechanics that produced the trolls, but
right.
This also means that they have to be somewhere around in order to remove them. So if I deploy the press gangers far away, 12 inches from the zone, then they can move in there, etc. So it was enough to contest one zone for 2 turns. Talon contested for 1 turn, then the Pressgangers contested for 2 turns, and that was enough. He did have 1 Arknote in his list, and he did have this character Pistol Braid.
All right.
But it was not enough.
All right. Is it the Hellslinger?
Yeah.
All right. It does sound like Slayers can struggle into Bartolo. There's not much that they can do. What about his second list? I think the second list would at least have a game. He could maybe jump the scenario, maybe try some feedback action. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the second list would be a bit better. I think that people underestimate how massive Bartolo fit can be for the game. Like usually people are kind of expecting that he will hang out somewhere far behind the Colossals, and most of the game he's actually running in front of the Colossals.
Yeah, even if they have guns, those guns needs to be steady or range more than 12 to shoot Bartolo. So
yeah, in this case, there was virtually no model that could damage Bartolo on his fifth turn. Even if he would like to arc some spells, the Arknote would need to enter the control, and then he's knocked down and he cannot arc then.
Yeah.
He cannot channel. The caster is not steady, and everything else is knocked down. So if it doesn't already start in melee with the Montador, then it cannot really threaten him. He's very safe on the fifth turn. And this allows him to really feed very, very aggressively.
All right, so that was the third round of the day. So let's move to the fourth round, which is the last round of the day, if I remember correctly. And it was played on Spread the Net.
Yeah, so we were supposed to play potentially 6 rounds if the initial number of players would show up. With the lower number, the organizers decided to split the rounds for 1. So we were playing 4 round day 1. And that was the last round. I played on Spread the Net against Rafał Anusiak who was playing on Poland West team, and he was playing the same pair he was playing at the WTC, namely Gareth 2 and Iseria.
Yeah, so you got Gareth 2 again. Like, lucky you, Gareth 2 twice and Crucible Guard, so not an easy tournament for you.
Yeah, fortunately at this level, like the third plan was accomplished, and Tomasz Mucha lost somewhere in the second round. So there was a cherry on top of this quite bitter cake.
Yeah, happy to help.
Happy to help. I was a team player.
Yeah. All right, so Kravat brought his WTC pair, which is Gareth 2 with 2 Tridents and AFG. Is that right?
Yeah, so actually he did change his lists in retrospect a bit. So his Gareth 2 lists for the WTC sported 2 Harpies, Moros, and I think some other things. But in general, he replaced them for the 2 cheapest heavies that he has, sporting just 1 Harpy and Moros. And in the Iseria list, he decided to put a Colossal there.
All right. Did you care at all about the Iseria list?
So if I would play Bartolo, Iseria list is a problematic, but we did play before the WTC a lot into Retribution. I knew it's a problematic matchup, and I knew that I have to play Magnus betting on a scenario play. So in a way, Iseria was also, like, from my point of view, both of the lists force me to play similar plan. They have a bit different tools, but more or less the plan for the game is similar. You try to apply the pressure, and you try to either convert this pressure into scenario presence and fast scenario win, or potentially, if there is an opportunity, you convert this pressure into attrition advantage.
Okay. It doesn't sound like an easy run for you, especially that Rafał is known for his aggressive scenario plays. But maybe he lacked experience into Magnus2, or maybe something else? Tell me about it. Tell me, how did the game go?
Yeah, so actually we did play this during our preparations, and we did play this 2 times, so we more or less know what is the base plan for each other in this game. So there were no surprises here. Unsurprisingly, I picked Magnus2. He picked guard 2. Regarding the table, this table was quite dense, so there were two clouds in the middle combined as one, so they could really block line of sight to each other. On my right side, there was a large table in the middle of the table, but to the right. So it was along the middle line, but to the right. We were playing Spread the Net, so it was blocking access to my rectangular zone, and it was partially inside the circular zone. However, there was access to the zone from the far right. In addition, there was a large house in the middle, right in front of my deployment zone. So having 3 huge bases, Rafał took the other side, hoping that this house would force some ineffective round 1 from my side. And that was partially the issue, but I still wanted to go first. I think that this heavily... it was still way better than going second and avoiding that house.
Yeah, because you can put the colossal between those 2 buildings or to the left and next to the middle building and put something to your zone, which was blocked by the building. So it would be really hard for Rafał to contest, right?
Yeah, exactly. In addition, I observed that after the first turn, my caster, if I would decide to feed second turn, I could both fit behind the building, so the Magnus would be quite safe and he could fit quite far. And he would actually there was a point behind the house where he would be in the both of the zones, or at least I could choose which of the zone and he would be quite far with the fit. On the other hand, if the action moved to the left side, he could move and fit from behind the clouds. It's not a super safe space, but it's still like it's a luxury very often you don't have when you fit with Magnus.
All right. So how did the game go?
So as you said, I deployed a colossal left of the house. I decided that due to how the 2 houses are, I would from the left side I would have I could charge in many directions, and instead, if I would deploy my colossals on the right, there would be very limited angles for the colossal to charge. So I decided to move him to the left and to run with all 3 warjacks on the right. So somewhere between those 2 buildings, run 2 of my all 3 warjacks that were not colossal, caster, Harlow hide behind the building,
like Harlow does.
Yeah, that was also a perfect spot for him. On the left side, once there was a colossal, and let me think, where were the Adrians? Yeah, so the Adrians were even farther to the left. I deployed 1 Kayazi Eliminator units on both sides, and Alexia was on the left side with some support souls in the middle.
So what was Kayazi Eliminator's role there? I mean, on the right side of the building?
So most of the time, they very often block the landing spaces for the Trident. So with all the rules that Trident has, flight, slam, reposition, it's not that easy to pin the movement of Trident with Magnus Fit, because even if you would like to block his movement, either they can move into the position to shoot Magnus, maybe they can move outside of Fit and then reposition to the zone. So very often what is critical in order to really pin Tridents where you would like them to be, not where your opponent would like them to be, is to use the Kayazi Eliminators to either block the landing spots or to block the movement in one side.
All right.
So they were a bit farther to the left, to the right, but still quite close to the center. If I decide for them to be more active, then they would still have the way to do their job.
I guess we'll find out in a minute if they did. So I assume you won the roll. So tell me about the game. How did it go?
Yeah, I went first. Rafał sent me to the side with the big house. He deployed his army more or less symmetrically, so there was a trident on each side. The AFG went directly in the middle. There was one heavy on each side of the table between tridents and AFG.
All right.
And also Moros was on the left side.
And did he deploy his wall from the theme force?
Yeah, I think he deployed it.
Oh, interesting. All right. Carry on.
In addition, he deployed his Electromancers on my right. So the first turn, I ran with the Kaisi Almaiders on my right into the rectangular zone. The caster charged in the middle. The Jacks ran. The Colossal on the left ran. Idrians advanced so that they would tempt some shooting in order for Alexia to collect souls, but not far enough to get shot by Trident. Yeah. And on the other hand, what Rafał did was that he ran very far with the Trident on my right. The Trident on the left stayed just outside of the reach of the threat range of the blockader. In the middle, AFG ran, but just outside of the threats of my Warjacks. This heavy Warjack on the right.
Sorry to interrupt you. What's the threat of your Warjacks into AFG? It's not that far, right?
It's 12 inches. Still, if I decide to trample, that's 14 points of damage from each Warjack. So if I can combine this with some additional damage, then yeah, they potentially can do something.
All right.
If it's in range of the Colossal, then that's quite heavy, quite dead AFG.
All right.
In addition, the thing is that if he doesn't really have to go really far, like I'm going to come to him, but if he is within my threat range, then it's easier for me to jam his battle engine.
Even under his fifth turn.
Yeah, so he didn't fit the first turn, but the thing is that if you tie with the combat, the battle engine, that it cannot aim and that he doesn't have the bonus for damage. So there's virtually no benefit of running too far with AFG first turn in this matchup.
All right, fair enough.
So he also moved up his heavy Warjacks. The left one tried to hide behind the forest, and the right one hid behind the house. So it was last round of this day, and we were both quite tired, and it could be actually seen in the game. So first of all, Rafał missed that even though the left trident is outside of the threat range of the Colossal, the heavy Warjack was within charge range, and actually my Colossal could see him. I think that during the movement of the models, he thought that it would be blocked somehow. Then he adjusted, but nonetheless, like he was within the charge range. And the second heavy was inside the extended control. It was inside at 14 inches, but it was outside 12. So the next turn, I decided to capitalize on those mistakes. So it was definitely going to be a fit turn. I charged with my Colossal into his heavy, and I managed to destroy the Cortex and slam the Jack away. So I was safe from it for at least one turn. And on the right side, the Talon actually walks 8 inches under Magnus2. So his total threat range of walking and melee is 10 inches. So he just walked around the house and managed to hit with his spear the heavy Warjack, making him stationary. And since he was outside of the control area, he couldn't shake it the next turn.
Ouch.
Then the caster fitted in the spot behind the house that we are talking about. So he fitted quite far into the army of Rafał, catching mainly the Trident on the right and his AFG. So the way I fitted is that the Trident on the right couldn't move through house into the middle zone. He also couldn't really move toward my zone because I blocked some parts of his movement with the Kaisi Eliminators. The other models that were around, namely AFG, couldn't move into the middle zone. And finally, the Harlow Hold'em High activated, moved up, and tried to kill as many small base models as he could. I think once again he killed 2 Electromancers and a sniper.
Poor guys. All right, so you chose your edge and the left edge of the table, correct?
Yes, so he was able to go backwards and to my right. And this resulted that he really couldn't move into my zone, like my rectangular zone. And the middle zone, the circular zone, was not really contested by him during that turn.
All right.
So, my first turn of engagement went quite good. I managed to knock away 2 of his heavies. Rafał tried to counter this bad situation and try to shoot as much things as he could. Unfortunately, he couldn't concentrate on one single target. So he decided to first concentrate on my Colossal, and that Colossal was attacked by 1 Trident, 1 AFG. Unfortunately, the AFG had to first knock down one of the heavies that was tying it up. So 1.5 activation of a battle engine and the caster was far from enough to kill the Colossal, especially that Orin was around. So there was virtually no possibility for him to apply the mortality. On the right side, the Trident couldn't really do a lot of useful things. So in the end, he didn't really kill a lot of models. He killed some Idrians, he knocked down a heavy, put some damage on my Warjacks, but nothing really died. And unfortunately, he lost a control point during his turn. So the next turn, I managed to kill a lot of things on his side, score a lot of points, and at this point, Rafał decided that it's pointless to play, and he conceded.
Yeah, it always bothers me a bit that the further you go in a tournament, the better the games are. I mean, you might get unlucky and get a big fish turn 1, but usually the further you go, the better opponent you get, but further you go, the more tired you are. And when you add stress to it, it's just easier to make a game-losing mistake, which is a shame.
Yeah, so the problem with Magnus2 is that he has really punishing feat. If you fuck up your deployment and you, for example, don't have models to run that are already on the other side and can contest, he can block the movement on one side of the table, and actually after that turn that for the next 2 turns you don't have any models to contest.
Yeah.
And with the current scenario pack, if you cannot contest an opponent's zone for 2 turns and your opponent can still clear the middle zone, then it's already like almost over.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there was this problem of the Warjack outside of control area that was stationary, which is not, you're not your most common scenario that can kind of happen during the game.
No, I mean that's unusual, but I mean, as we say, in later rounds that can always happen. But I think like Magnus2 has always upset me a little bit. I never like him very much because it does seem very polarized. Like either his feat just completely uber fucks you, or he makes a mistake and he dies. I know that's not like that's not unusual. There are plenty of situations where it's polarized, but I don't know. Magnus2 just feels like one of those that's very, very ball busting. Yeah, but I can imagine that playing him must be super fun.
So like playing when you can really when your Colossal has 14 inches threat. That's really fun.
Yes.
And also running into the middle of the table and saying like, okay, that's my riddle, try to solve it.
I love that part. Yeah.
I agree that very often the case is that Magnus just walks into the middle of the table and dies. However, very often just the threat of him going into the middle of the table and fitting forces your opponent to move in a very uncomfortable way for him. He has to spread like his forces so that not all of those models are caught in one fit in fit. And that forces him to move the models backwards. And this, in the end, very often you don't have to fit at all, or you fit at very late stages of the game when the caster is usually safe. So there are some games when you fit early, and usually in this game, like you try to keep him safe. On the other hand, very often you just fit at the moment when you feel safe. So there is not really a reason to activate the Warcaster before any other models. So usually you activate your army, see if you are safe, if you can make the caster safe, and then you decide whether it's worthy or not to fit.
Right. You can roll the dice first, see whether you clear the zone, see whether you're going to score. Because, I mean, one of the worst things to happen must be if you feated early and be like, right, I'll score 2, then he won't be able to contest, and then I'll score 2. And then suddenly you fail to clear a zone or something and you don't score. Like that would just be horrific.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
The second thing is that actually Magnus2 is quite hard to kill. Like, he starts as 14-17. He has unyielding. He has escort. So if he has warjack nearby, that brings him to 14-19. If something wants to melee, that's 14-21. That's like a stats of
like a Gatorix, right?
Yeah, and in addition, usually the main job of Hermit at the early stage is to make sure that Magnus2 survives.
Yeah.
So most of the fit turn, he's like 14-19, maybe 14-21, with 2 or 3 additional focus and Hermit around, and Ori.
Yeah.
So it's, like a lot of resources, but on the other hand, like those resources are spent on super good fit that can make the caster unsafe, but...
Yeah, in that case, he's almost unkillable. So it's like short of some stationary or paralysis nonsense. And even then, like, his armor is still decent.
Yeah, spoiler alert, almost is an almost, and we'll see this in the next game.
All right.
So let's move to it. It's finals. Who was your opponent in the finals?
So I played against Tomasz Tutaj, who was playing in Poland Central, the team that took the second place during this year's WTC. He switched from playing Protectorate to playing Circle, and he was playing Chromac 1 in both of Ouroboros, and he was playing Grail with Tarns.
Yeah, what I found funny about this is that he switched to Circle in the day of the tournament, so he wouldn't play any practice games before the tournament with Circle. So that was quite funny to see how he learned his army during the tournament, and he realizes in the 5th round, so the finals, that some of the models have advanced deployment.
Yeah, that was true. Actually, when I was checking the defensive stats of his model, he learned that Bridget and Cowl actually have advanced deployment. The other highlight of our last battle was that he thought that the well gives the hyper aggressive to all war beasts, not only constructs, and going into the back arc of Loki, and then having him like advance through the hyper aggressive. That's quite massive.
Yeah, +2 armor, and if he doesn't warp for preternatural reflexes or...
I think it's prenatural reflexes.
No, it's worse. It's not prenatural. But anyway, speaking about Loki, so he chose Grail. What did you choose?
I played Magnus2. As we mentioned before, the scenario was Invasion. The setup of the table was exactly the same as we talked before. It was the first table, and it was put a bit in a quieter space of the tournament. So that was like the design table for the finals. And actually, once again, I won the roll. We mentioned that usually with the +1 and reroll, you can win 5 games. Fortunately, there were only 5 games in this tournament. There was not a 6th one. And once again, I chose to going first, and he chose the side. So I was sent to the same side with the building. However, you asked about the list. So he was playing Grail, which is like an old love of his, and whatever people say, Tomasz, if he has an occasion, he wants to play Grail.
Sure.
And in his list, he had Loki, he had Getorix, and that was his battle group. He also has this Tarn caster attachment. He was playing 1 large unit of Tarn Ravagers with the unit attachment. He had Bridget and Cole. He had Death Wolves. He had 3 Gallows Grove. He had Well of Ouroboros. And Simon, for your statistics, actually, these were void because Tomasz didn't put the solo out of the well. He has also Lord of the Fist. He had 1 unit of stones. And I think I'm missing something.
The crockpot?
The crockpot, exactly.
Yeah, that does sound very similar to the list I'm playing with Baldur 1, but instead of Loki and Primal Archon, I have the Storm Raptor.
Yeah, and you mentioned one model I forgot about, and that was Primal Archon.
Yeah, the mighty Primal Archon, the strongest of all Archons.
You know, he was playing in finals.
Yeah. All right, let's see how the Primal Archon do. So who won the starting role?
So I won. I decided to go first. He sent me to the same table edge with the big house in the middle. I deployed virtually the same. So on the left side of the house, I deployed the Colossal. On the right side, I deployed 2 heavies and Talons and Caster in the middle on the right side of this house.
Sorry, you probably mentioned that, but it is the same table you've played against Rafa, right?
Yes, it's the same.
All right, carry on. Sorry to interrupt you.
The one thing that was changed is that since he deployed his well on my left side and Tarn Ravagers on my right side, I decided to deploy my Idrians against his Tarn Ravagers and pray them.
All right.
On his side, he deployed the well on the left. He deployed the Tarn Ravagers on the right. And then he deployed like virtually everything else in the middle with the Getorix a bit to the right and Loki a bit to the left.
All right. So we know the deployments. Tell me about the game.
So turn 1 from Magnus is no surprise. I virtually run everything as far as I can. I decided not to give him good shots from the well, so the Colossal stopped just outside of the shooting range of the well. Also, the Eliminators stopped far away from the deviation this time. On the right side, due to the house and due to lack of any models in advanced deployment, the Adrians could run full 12 inches and they were quite far on the board. And that's where I ended my first turn. And due to the Lord of the Fist being in the middle of the table inside the
shifting stones.
Yeah, I had to reposition, like to stop some of my models a bit earlier in order to not be within the teleport and shooting range of the Lord of the Fist.
What are you most worried about Lord of the Feast sniping out?
My caster.
Oh, just your caster. Okay, and can he do that? I mean, with those stats?
So actually, with Grail, you can really get
Grail.
powered.
Yep, of course. Yep.
So he has Storm Rager, so he goes to Mat 10, power 15 base. Then with 3
16
tokens,
base.
he goes
16
to
base.
16 base. Yeah, so he goes to
8.
a lot of power with Science and Portents. Yeah, that's like really...
Yeah, he can do it.
It's a challenge even for Magnus.
Yeah.
Probably if it is just the Lord of the Fist, then he survives. However,
with vision
if there's
and
anything
stuff.
additional, then he has high chance of dying.
Yeah.
And what objective did he took? Was it treasure chest?
Oh, actually, I'm not sure I remember what he did pick. I remember that I picked Isla's Sight as an objective.
All right.
And I'm not sure what he did pick. Oh, I think it was a treasure chest. Yes, he did have the rerolls. Yeah, it was treasure chest.
Okay, so that's a dangerous feast.
Yeah. So, I ran the first turn, and what Tomasz did, that he decided to match my movement with some aggressive movements of himself. So he decided to run his Tarn Ravagers quite far, actually engaging my Idrians on the right, with 2 turns, Chief and 1 in the middle and some in the back. The Death Wolves decided to camp a bit farther. In the middle, there was Loki, but outside of any threat ranges. And the Getorix hided behind the house in the middle on the right. So he was potentially threatening to contest for a very long time the right circular zone, or he could potentially move toward the middle if needed. The Lord of the Feast, Bridget and Cole, were somewhere in the middle trying to be safe from my Colossal. So they were outside of 17 inches, which was 7-inch movement and 10 inches spray from the Colossal. And that was virtually the whole turn.
I think you've missed the most important model.
The Primal Archon.
Of course.
So Primal Archon decided that he wouldn't want to be caught in the fit, and Tomek decided to move him very far to my left, like flanking almost everything. So he was at the far edge of the left circular zone. What happened during my turn is I decided that it was a good turn to fit with my caster. So with that in mind, I thought that it's safe to kill turn Ravagers, because even with the Vengeance, they couldn't retaliate that much with the fit in place. So Quasi Eliminators unblocked and jumped the Idrians, then Idrians activated, and together they wiped virtually the whole unit, including the attachment. In the middle, I decided to shoot the only thing I could shoot with my Colossal, which was a Sentry Stone, not a Sentry Stone, a Shifting Stone, one Shifting Stone, and put some damage on Loki that was within the shooting range. And then I charged with my caster into the middle. And then I realized that it was probably not a good place to fit. We were talking already about this minutes ago. So I realized that actually there is a lot of dangers for my caster. So first of all, there is a Crockpot that could gallows me. There was gallows from Grail. There was Truck from Loki, and there was Lord of the Fist. So I decided to set up a small bunker. So in front of my Warcaster, there were two heavies, and touching him. And behind the Warcaster, there were some small-based solos. With two notable mentions. On my left, there was a Widget. And behind her, there was Orin, who had range for the spell negation aura to my Warcaster and to the left Warjack, but didn't have the range to the right Warjack. So, and the worst part was that all of those things were, like, both the Warjacks and the Warcaster were within the shooting range of the Lord of the Fist.
All right, but he couldn't place his base there, correct?
Unfortunately, he could, because it was not that two Warjacks were like touching each other in front of the Warcaster. There was actually a space in the middle, so he could either shoot my caster directly, but then he wouldn't be able to place, or he could shoot one of the Warjacks place, and then he would have my caster within the range. Yeah, that was not a good play from my side.
All right, and it probably makes sense to shoot the Warjacks because they are lower in defense, right?
Yeah, they are 11 instead of 14. So what did happen during the Tomasz turn? He decided to go for a caster kill, especially that it doesn't cost that much to him. So he forced me to use Hermit on Loki, shot my caster with his chain. I used Hermit, Medvision's ability on that. Then he wanted to potentially remove the Orin, and this is where interesting ability comes into the game. A lot of new Riot Quest solos have like a shitload of new rules, and one of these is Widget, which is like a 3-point model, which primary abilities are a mechanic and ancillary attack, but that's just 2 skills out of 8. And one of those abilities...
Sorry, I'm gonna jump in if I may, which is, you mentioned Riot Quest models, and I have, quite open dislike for the game, and I just wondered what your opinion on Riot Quest models, not necessarily not the game Riot Quest itself, but on its introduction and use in War Machine and the impact that those 19 million rule models have, and their sort of slightly ridiculous sculpts and design and so on. Is that something you're a fan of, or is that something you think that adds interest to the game and it like broadens it, or are you sort of more on my page that it's a bit of a pisser?
So I think it really depends on the models themselves. So all of those models really fall into one team force, which was already like a bag of weird stuff. and you just added a bit more weird stuff into that bag. So you already had a Warjax together with a crocodile and a hat. I'm talking about Rongai. And then if you take Rongai, Snapjaw with some the proportions of the Warjacks are also very specific. And then you put some models from Riot Quest next to those. They don't really look ridiculous. They actually quite fit this band of weird models from the rules. And actually some of the models are really nice. Some of the models are ridiculous in their look. Like, for example, Death with supersized
bazooka.
Oh, yeah.
However, my favorite model from the Riot Quest, which is Widget, is a super nice model. It's a super nice, super good looking model, really visually well designed.
So visually and design wise, you're on board. You sort of come from a slightly different viewpoint of me, that maybe because of some of the more ridiculous stuff that already exists in War Machine, that it's okay to add some slightly ridiculous stuff because it fits as is. Yeah, fair enough. That's a viewpoint I can see. And how about the rules side of things?
So I think that when we are talking about the bazillion rules on a single model, I think that's a theme of Mercenaries in general. I still remember our game from last year when we played against each other in the final of EU Masters, and that was one of the last 8-year tournament. So I had 2 lists with a lot of solos, and then on top of that I had additional 40 points of models that were very niche model designed for specific matchups. And in the end, I just left War Room open with Simon, and then left.
It took me 15 minutes at least.
I think it was closer to 30.
That would not surprise me. It was my worst nightmare. So I didn't know Mercenaries at all. We had no mercenary player in the whole country that I'd played. And then he turns up with a list that's full of 18,000 solos, all named with strange names that I couldn't pronounce, never mind remember. And then he's like, oh, and also I can put any of these 40 points of other solos in at my leisure. Here's War Room. I was like, oh, fuck. It was a nightmare. And I don't process new information quickly. I need to sit down and take my time and sort of take it in and try and think about it. Oh, God, Mercenaries, fucking hate them.
Yeah, so most of the models inside Mercenaries already have a full-blown stories around. So you take those 2 4-point and 5-point model, namely Taran and Rutger, and they actually have 3 books written about them and a dozen of stories around them, just purely about them. So it's not really a surprise that I have, a small fluffy rules like partner dodge that triggers only when you field both the models and they are close to each other. So every of this character has really rich background story, and sometimes this is reflected in the rules in a small niche rules that happens once in every 6 games. And actually most of the models in Mercenaries are like that already. So if you take your random model from the irregulars, that's already a character solo. Usually they have between 4 to 6 special rules.
And do you think that's good?
I'm not sure. So I think that's just a flavor of the army in a way. That's it's a pool of characters, and those characters have they're very specifics. With the recent spoilers of the Nemo 4 being a battle engine that can summon a non-character solo, it turns out that actually there are virtually no non-character solo in the whole faction. There are, 4, 5, compared to 30 character solos in the faction.
Right. That's an interesting stat. All right, so the argument is kind of that it's Mercenaries' thing, right?
Yeah. Actually, when you look just at the number of the releases, this year for Mercenaries, there was 1 new Warcaster and 21 solos.
Jesus. All right. Anyway, I'm really sorry. I jumped in and I interrupted when you were talking about the solo, but you said Riot Quest and it triggered that thought in my head, and I wondered what your opinion on it was. So anyway.
Simon wanted to throw some positivity into the podcast.
Always my job. That's why I earn the big money. Right. Carry on.
So the thing with Widget is that she's primarily an ancillary attack and a mechanic. She also is a speedy flying model. However, she also has a magical weapon, reach. She's mat 6, so that's not really like often comes into play, but she has critical knockdown on it. She has some reposition. She also has a Jack Hunter if she actually hits anything, and there is a Warjack like already in my backlines. However, she has this one neat rule which sometimes comes in handy, and that's a fly high. For people unfamiliar with the rule, it's the rule that is on this angry Thunderbird in the Circle of Boros. So when you shoot at this model, it reduces your range by 3 inches. And also friendly or friendly faction models can advance through it. So two often scenarios that it can surprise the opponent is that when they decide to actually shoot her and she's in range, and then it turns out that she's outside of the range. And the second thing is that actually you can countercharge through her, and that surprises quite often people. So this is exactly what happened. So Tomek had either the option to shoot my caster directly and just put some damage on him. I had virtually no shield guards in this list. Or he could shoot at Widget, and then if he would kill with the blast damage Orin, then he would actually could cast Gallows on my Warjacks, spread them around, and then do something more creative with my Warcaster. So he decided to do that. However, he forgot totally about the rule, and in the end, it turned out that the well was out of range with shooting, and the shot scattered backwards. He proceeded with the rest of the plan, so he shot with the Lord of the Fist with all those power-ups. So he had 3 corpses. He had Storm Rager on him. He had Puppet Master, which is reroll. He had rerolls from the objective, and also Science and Portents from the caster attachment. So, like just the number of tokens on him was impressive. And then he proceeded to try to kill my caster. So in the end, he ended up 4 boxes short. And he, that was not far away. So my casters was there was a shot from the well, there was Loki shot, and there was a full packed Lord of the Fist. In the end, not counting the Hermit, there was just Lord of the Fist against 2 focuses and 14-21 caster, and he still managed to almost kill him.
That does sound a bit like bad rolls, but I might be wrong. Did you run math on it?
I think we did. He decided to boost the damage rolls. So those were 2 boosted damage rolls. I'm not sure we did run the math. It sounded okay. I mean, he was rolling dice of 4, dice of 5. Right. So that was dice of 9, dice of 11, including focus. And he still caused 13 damage.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. That doesn't sound like bad rolls anymore. But I think the correct order would be to make an attack, buy an attack, and then buy and boost. Because with so many rerolls, you can afford to hope for some spikes. And if you do 3 attacks, the last one would be without the focus. So...
yeah, that's true. Probably at this point, this lack of experience with Circle kicked in, and he didn't have this internalized. He did think about this, and this is in the end what he came up with.
Fair enough.
So fortunately my caster lived, but it was not far from dying. So what happened the next turn is that I managed to score a point during his turn. Actually, I missed that if I managed to clear all the zones, I would win on the scenarios, and I could do that.
Wait. We missed the Primal Archon.
So he ran.
That's important.
What a champ.
So it was still Magnus' feet turn, so apart from those, not really anything else happened. The one additional thing that happened is that he decided to shield his army with Getorix. So Getorix ran from behind the building to the center zone, just facing my side. So now the ball was in my court. So first of all, I had to clear my caster and then run in order to live another day. So fortunately, with the ancillary attack, I managed to kill and dismantle Lord of the Fist first activation. Then I proceeded to move my Hermit up in order to apply -2 armor on his heavies. Then my Warcaster killed the Getorix. I killed also Stones, but didn't even touch the Loki. And my Warcaster ran to behind the building on my right. So I scored another point in my right zone, which was 2-0, and there was no points in the other zone. The left zone was ambitiously blocked by the Primal Archon. So what happened next is that the Lord of the Fist is not the only hard-hitting model in this army. There's also Cole, and the Brigade and Cole were praying the Blockader. So this was the fifth turn. He had to fit in order to bring Brigade and Cole into the range of charging the Colossal, and this is more or less what he did. So he fitted. He killed some random models. I'm not sure even where and what. And then he charged with Brigade and Cole the Blockader, which had applied Master of Ruin from his Hermit. He had all the buffs that he could master, including the Storm Rager, and almost just with the activation of Brigade and Cole, he wrecked the Colossal, even with the Unyielding. And that was the highlight. He also cleared the left zone and contested the right zone. Apart from that, we didn't score, so that put us into 2-1 range.
And what did the Primal Archon do?
He ran.
All right.
Actually, there will be an episode when a Primal Archon is a star, so be ready for that.
All right, can't wait.
Yeah. So the next turn, I was slowly low on clock, and it started affecting. Also, Tomasz was far from being high on the clock, and it really did affected our plays. So I tried to kill Loki, and unfortunately I failed. I cleared my right zone, I killed the objective, and that put me in the 2-1, 3-1, 4-1 range of scenario. However, I forgot to actually activate my Warcaster. He was supposed to run even further, but I don't know why I decided not to activate him. And that opened an angle for the last chance assassination from Tomasz. So if he would free up the Loki, he either could try to hit Magnus in cover or take Hunter and ignore cover. So in the end, the math was in favor of having Hunter, so he would need to roll a boosted 8, followed by boosted 11, and then he would kill my caster. Of course, if he would clear the path for Loki to move into the position. He decided to take this chance, which was a bit less than 50%, but still way more than the potentially what was on the table, including the scenario point situation. So what he did is that he charged with Krail into one of my Tauros. Then he moved away with the sidestep. From this position, he casted the Gallows, moving away the Wenjack from the path. And then he charged with his Primal Archon into my Tauro, knocking it down.
Hooray!
So with a knockdown Tauro, he wrecked the other Tauro with Brigid, Cowl, and the Well. And with that, Loki just had to take one free strike from Talon, and he would be in the position. Unfortunately, with the Tauro knockdown, he also knocked down Grail.
All right.
And then he moved the Loki into the position. He needed 8, followed by 11. And, luck is also a skill. He missed the 8. So the caster would live another day. At this point, in order to do that, he had to forego scoring on the left zone. He also didn't block the right zone. So virtually the next turn, I would automatically win on the scenario. In order to be, square and fair, I decided to kill the Grail to take the Polish Masters title third time.
That's a nice way to finish it.
Yeah.
But I think we should have killed the Primal Archon as well, so that we can say he died valiantly in battle.
To be honest, I think that at this point I didn't have enough models to kill him.
He stands tall.
Just one thing, I actually did charge with Widget into the Grail.
And did you kill him with Widget?
No, but actually she wasn't far away from that. So, Grail was lying down and he was 0 Fury, and he also had the -2 arm debuff from the Hermit. So, he was not a challenging target, but she's still like power 11. So she only did like 11 boxes, and then the Harlow Hold'em High actually did the kill.
Amazing. Oh, well, congratulations again. Very well done.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
What are your plans for the upcoming future? Have you got any tournaments that you're attending soon?
So I'm definitely going for the Boosted Con, which is the host for EU Masters this year. Usually it was hosted by Black Oil in Czech. This time it's being hosted by the Boosted Con Convent, organized by Szymon Radka, which will be later this year in Silesia.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, you brought it up. Let's talk about that. So, Tomasz, have you got the details for people?
Yeah, it's 29th of November to 1st December. So it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's in Zabrze, which is Zabrze. And to get there, you can fly to Katowice Airport or Krakow Airport. It should be easy to find connections there. And if you need any help, you can contact me or Szymon Radka. And yeah, I would strongly recommend getting there. It's a EU Masters.
Yeah, it's the EU. The concept of the EU Masters tournament is something I've always really supported. I think it's a fantastic idea, and the fact that it's moved to join another growing and bigger convention is a fantastic thing. And I'm really happy that it's staying alive and even growing, I would say. So that's fantastic. Any other little plugs people want to do? Oh, I forget. I will plug the Twitch stream again. So, yes, I'm doing all sorts of online gaming stuff, horror stuff, puzzle stuff, competitive auto chess, Dota, all manners of things at twitch.tv/honest Psy. Psy as in Simon, S-I, not like, oh. So, yeah, come across and say hello. I'm there every Monday to Thursday from 8 till 11 Central European time.
Yeah, and speaking about Twitch, we should probably plug War Room PL, because Marcin, who is running the channel, he got back to streaming games. So every Thursday on War Room PL Twitch channel, you can see him streaming games of War Machine.
Is it? Have they got like a channel? Like, I realize it's the War Room PL channel, but is it like a specific name of a series that they're doing, or is it just battle reports that they're putting out, or what's the format?
Oh, I have no idea what's the name for it, or if the series even has a name, but it's every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central European time. Marcin is playing games of War Machine live.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Well, Marcin, anything you would like to say before we wrap up?
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast.
Our pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for such detailed info on the pairing. I was really interested to hear like your reasons for the orange swap and the pairing itself. And like after I saw it at WTC, I was really fascinated. So I was looking forward to this episode to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Marcin, for coming to the show. It's always a pleasure to talk War Machine and get some insight on Mercenaries from you. Congrats again on your win, and I guess happy to help with the dodge.
Thank you. Hope that we continue this cooperation smoothly in the future.
All right. Take care, guys. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye.